back to my channel. My name is Joanne and I've gone kind of plant crazy during quarantine. In this video, I wanted to show you guys how I made this moss pole for my golden pothos and android pothos. So the reason why vining plants like pothos, philodendron, and monstera really enjoy being staked up is because that gives the plant the ability to grab onto that pole with its aerial roots, and it kind of mimics what the plant would experience in its regular habitat in the tropics, where these plants would be vining up a large tree. And what usually happens is as the vining plant climbs up that tree, the leaves will get bigger and eventually they will start to fenestrate, which is where they get like first the holes and then like the split leaves basically. You'll see that more frequently with plants such as monstera because for them the fenestration just comes earlier from what I've seen, but with pothos it is completely possible. It just depends on the age at which you buy your pothos at. So if the pothos is very small, like the leaves are very small, it's at a very juvenile age, eventually you would like to train it up the moss pole, and I've seen several people do this where they train it up and then the vine goes back down and then back up again, and it kind of mimics the growth of the plant in its regular habitat, and eventually you'll have like foot-long leaves. Hopefully that's gonna happen with my pothos. It's definitely gonna take a long time. I've heard like some people growing their pothos for about 20 years and their leaves just begin to split. So don't expect that you'll be going into this getting split leaves right away, but you will definitely get bigger leaves. Now the major reason why I wanted to have this moss pole is I started to notice that my leaves were starting to get a lot smaller. Like any of the newer growth was a lot smaller than what I had bought the plant at, and that's definitely okay if you like that look, but I wanted my leaves to be just a little bit bigger because I felt like, oh, if I just let this keep going, eventually it'll just be vine and no leaf. So
you'll need some string or twine and scissors, and you'll also need the stick that you're attaching the sphagnum moss to. I'm using a metal rod that my sister had lying around, but you can use a bamboo stake, and of course your plant of choice. Also, this is a PSA for you fellow beginners out there. This is Canadian sphagnum peat moss, and it's more similar to cocoa coir when it's broken down, or like even potting soil. This is the type of sphagnum moss that you would use for soil amendment or to create like the base for a potting soil. And that is not the type of sphagnum that you use for a sphagnum moss pole. So when you guys are trying to make a moss pole at home, the sphagnum moss that you are going to use is the long fiber kind. It's usually dry. I'll put up an image right here of what it should look like so that you can actually tie the moss to the pole. I guess this is just a lesson. Don't order stuff on Amazon when it's like 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning. We have acquired the sphagnum moss. First off, what I did was moisten the sphagnum moss, because when you order long fiber sphagnum moss, it's usually in a compressed bale like this. So you do have to moisten it a little bit, but make sure that it's not overly wet. The consistency that you want is kind of like a dried out sponge. I kind of eyeballed it here, but I was just trying to make enough sphagnum moss to cover the pole. I used my scissors to mark my pole where it would meet the soil line, so you would only be applying moss above this mark. I cut a bunch of the string. Ideally, you wouldn't be using string, you would be using some kind of netted material. This could be from like old vegetable. I think onions especially come in like those mesh bags. Unfortunately, I just didn't have any of those on hand, so I was using what I had, which was string. If you're using string, you're definitely gonna have to secure it a lot more versus if you're using netting. And honestly, after making this, I might go back and whenever I do get a hold of netting, I'm going to probably attach that on top of the pole so it just could be a little bit less messy. And here I am just tapping off the excess sphagnum moss. Also, do not dispose any of the excess sphagnum moss that you have from this project because you can definitely use it to create a prop box. If you guys would like to see a video on how to make a propagation box using sphagnum moss, definitely comment down below. But it's a great way to propagate roots on plants such as pothos. I'm going around the pole one more time with a string to really secure it down. Now, here is the most difficult part. I don't know if it's just me, but oh my gosh, when I first got this plant, this was actually my first houseplant ever. I just didn't know how to pot things together. The way I potted these tendrils together just didn't make sense. The soil that I used for this was absolutely the wrong type. I used just straight garden soil, and pothos is a plant that really loves well-draining soil. And I'm suffering the consequences now because the soil had gotten compacted to the point where it was just impossible to get the plant out of this pot. Ideally, if you had a nursery pot, this would be a lot easier because you would just slip it in and out of the planter. Unfortunately, this is all I have to work with, so I had to sweat just a little bit more than if I had that nursery pot. Here I am amending the soil with some perlite. Once I added that, I've noticed that my pothos is actually doing a lot better. I also added a few mosquito bits in here, which I hadn't the first time around, and I did have a slight gnat problem in the beginning. Now I'm just positioning the pothos around the stake. I couldn't put the stake in the center of my pot because this terracotta pot only has a single draining hole in the center. So I positioned it a little off center and I kind of like the look. I'm totally unsure if pothos and joy ever fenestrates or has splits in the leaves. Hopefully the leaves do get bigger. If you guys have any advice, definitely comment down below because I have no idea what I'm doing half the time. Still a whole lot left.
So this is what the plant looks like after I have the moss pole. It definitely doesn't look like a store-bought one, but I think it does the job. So after I potted it up, I kind of just zhuzh the leaves around, and I think what helps the most is like pointing the leaves towards, like pointing the vines towards the pole so that eventually it will climb up. And this is actually the day after I finished filming that part of the video, and the moss pole has dried out. You'll have to mist this moss pole frequently, at least in the beginning before like your vines start climbing up the moss pole, because otherwise I don't really know if roots are going to develop with such a dry medium. If you've ever done this or have any advice for people, definitely comment down below because we are all pretty much plant beginners here, I think, during quarantine. We would love that advice. Thank you guys so much for watching my video. If you liked it, please give me a thumbs up and comment down below what other kind of videos you would like to see. I hope you have a great day and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!